During our New Year's dinner, my husband whispered, "Don't make any plans for January." After the countdown, he stepped out to take a call. A few minutes later, I checked his phone and found a message that said, "Is she ready?" His reply sent me into a panic. "Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from." I've never been the type of woman who snoops through her husband's phone. In 40 years of marriage, I'd built our relationship on trust, mutual respect, and the kind of quiet understanding that comes from building a life together from nothing. But New Year's Eve 2024 changed everything. The dinner table gleamed with my best china, the set Robert and I had purchased in 1982 when our logistics company landed its first major contract. Our children, Michael and Joyce, sat with their spouses, picking at the prime rib I'd spent all afternoon preparing. The grandchildren were in the living room, absorbed in their devices, barely acknowledging the spread I'd laid out. Robert squeezed my hand under the table at exactly 11:47 p.m. His palm was damp, something I noticed immediately. In 4 decades, I'd never known my husband to have sweaty palms. He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "Don't make any plans for January, Margot." I turned to look at him, searching his weathered face for context. Robert was 72, solid as the oak desk in his office. With silver hair he kept meticulously trimmed. But tonight, his gray eyes held something I couldn't quite identify. Fear? Determination? "What do you mean?" I whispered back. He just patted my hand and stood to refill wine glasses, deflecting my question with practiced ease. I watched him move around the table, playing the gracious host. But something was wrong. The set of his shoulders, the way he avoided my gaze, these were tells I'd learned to read over a lifetime together. At midnight, we counted down with forced enthusiasm. Michael's wife, Vanessa, insisted on documenting everything with her phone, as if our family moment only existed if it appeared on her social media. Joyce's husband, Derek, checked his watch twice during the champagne toast. Our children had become strangers in expensive clothes, visiting their childhood home like tourists. The phone rang at 12:03 a.m. Robert excused himself, stepping into his study and closing the door. I heard the lock click, a sound that sent ice through my veins. In 43 years, Robert had never locked that door. It was his sanctuary, yes, but never a fortress. I circulated among our guests, accepting lukewarm compliments about the meal, smiling at Vanessa's thinly veiled criticism of my traditional decorating style. But my mind tracked the minutes Robert remained behind that locked door. 7 minutes. 10. 15. When he emerged, his face had gone pale beneath his tan. He moved straight to the liquor cabinet and poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon. Neat. Robert rarely drank hard liquor. "Everything okay, Dad?" Michael asked, barely looking up from his phone. "Fine. Just business." "On New Year's Eve?" Joyce's tone carried that edge of judgment she'd perfected in her 30s. "Business doesn't observe holidays, sweetheart. You know that." But I knew the logistics business too. I'd been Robert's partner since we'd started with a single delivery truck in 1981. I knew our clients, our routes, our contracts. And I knew that nothing, absolutely nothing, warranted a locked-door phone call at midnight on New Year's Eve. The party wound down around 1:30 a.m. Michael and Vanessa left first, barely stopping to collect their children. Joyce and Derek lingered, and I caught Joyce studying her father with unusual intensity. "Dad, you'd tell us if something was wrong, wouldn't you?" she asked as they stood in the foyer. Robert's laugh sounded hollow. "Of course. Now go on home. It's late." After they left, I began clearing dishes, my movements automatic from decades of routine. Robert sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone with an expression I'd never seen before. Not quite fear, not quite resignation, something darker. "Robert, what's going on?" "Nothing you need to worry about tonight. We'll talk in the morning." "We'll talk now." He looked up, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw him genuinely consider lying to me. I watched the calculation cross his face, the weighing of options. Then he sighed. "Go to bed, Margot. Please. I need to think." I wanted to press, to demand answers, but something in his voice stopped me. I kissed his forehead. He didn't look up, and climbed the stairs to our bedroom. Sleep was impossible. I lay in the dark, listening to Robert's footsteps below, the creak of his study door, the murmur of his voice on the phone. At 3 a.m., I heard him climbing the stairs. He paused outside our bedroom door for a long moment before moving to the guest room. That's when real fear settled into my bones. Robert hadn't slept in the guest room in 43 years. I waited until I heard his breathing even out, then crept downstairs. His phone lay on the kitchen counter, plugged into its charger. I stood over it for a full minute, decades of trust warring with the primal instinct that something was terribly wrong. The screen lit up with my touch. No passcode. Robert had never used one. He trusted me completely. I wish I could say I hesitated longer, but I didn't. I opened his messages. The most recent was from a number not saved in his contacts. Sent at 12:01 a.m. Is she ready? Robert's reply, sent at 12:15 a.m. She knows nothing. I'll handle it. We leave January 15th as planned. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I scrolled up, finding a thread of messages dating back 3 weeks. Cryptic references to the situation, pressure from the group, no other choice. And one message, sent December 20th, that made my blood run cold. They're getting impatient. If you don't convince her to sign, they'll move to Plan B. You know what that means. Robert's response. I won't let them touch her. 2 weeks. I need 2 weeks. I set the phone down carefully, exactly as I'd found it. My reflection in the darkened window above the sink looked back at me. A 70-year-old woman in a flannel nightgown, gray hair in a braid, lines etched deep around eyes that had seen 4 decades of partnership, struggle, and success. But the woman in the reflection wasn't the same woman who'd served prime ribs 6 hours ago. That woman had been content, secure in her life and marriage. This woman understood that everything she'd believed about her world was a carefully constructed lie. I climbed back upstairs, my mind racing. Robert was being coerced. Someone wanted us to sign something, presumably papers related to our company. They were threatening him, threatening me, and he was planning to take us to Canada on January 15th, 14 days from now. I slid back into bed, staring at the ceiling. In the guest room, Robert's breathing remained steady, undisturbed. He had no idea I knew. The question that kept me awake until dawn wasn't what Robert was hiding. I'd seen enough to understand the outline of that secret. The question was why. Our company was worth millions, built from nothing through sweat and sacrifice. Who would want to force us to sell? And what kind of pressure could make my unshakable husband plan a midnight escape to another country? As gray light filtered through the curtains, I made a decision. Robert was trying to protect me by keeping me ignorant. But ignorance wasn't protection, it was vulnerability. If someone was coming for us, for our life's work, I needed to know everything. I needed to understand the enemy we faced. And I needed to do it without Robert knowing I was investigating, because whatever he was planning, whatever desperate escape he'd arranged, was built on the assumption that I remained blissfully unaware. I'd spent 43 years being Robert's partner. Now I'd have to become something else entirely. His secret guardian, working in the shadows to protect us both from a threat he didn't think I could handle. The irony wasn't lost on me. My husband was trying to save me by keeping me in the dark. I would save us both by dragging everything into the light. But first, I needed to know exactly what we were running from, and I had exactly 14 days to find out. I started my investigation the way I'd built our business, methodically, quietly, and with absolute attention to detail. New Year's Day morning, I made Robert his usual breakfast: scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. He came down at 7, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly as he reached for the coffee mug. Rough night? I asked, keeping my tone light. Couldn't sleep. Too much rich food. The lie came easily to him, which frightened me more than anything else. How long had Robert been lying to me? Maybe you should see Dr. Patterson. Get something to help you rest. I'm fine, Margot. His voice carried an edge I'd rarely heard directed at me. Stop fussing. I bit back my response and watched him retreat to his study immediately after eating. The door didn't lock this time, but I heard him on the phone within minutes, his voice too low to make out words. I needed access to his study, to his computer, to the files he kept locked in the cabinet behind his desk. But more than that, I needed to understand the business side of our company, the parts Robert had always handled alone. We'd divided responsibilities decades ago. I managed operations, logistics, employee relations, and client services. Robert handled finances, contracts, legal matters, and strategic planning. It had been an efficient partnership. Now I realized it had also been a vulnerability. I knew how to run trucks and manage routes. I had no idea who really owned what percentage of our company, what debts we carried, or who had the power to force us out. I waited until Robert left for his daily walk, a habit he'd maintained for 20 years, rain or shine. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I was in his study. The filing cabinet was locked. Of course it was. But I'd watched Robert open it thousands of times, and I knew he kept the key in the same place he'd kept it since 1985, inside a hollowed-out copy of The Art of War on the third shelf. My hands shook as I unlocked the cabinet. Inside, folders were meticulously organized by year and category. I pulled out the one labeled Corporate Structure 2024. What I found made my stomach drop. 3 months ago, Robert had been approached by something called the North Point Development Group. They wanted to purchase our company, not for its logistics operations, but for our real estate holdings. Over 40 years, we'd acquired warehouses, distribution centers, and commercial properties across 3 states. Apparently, North Point was assembling a massive development portfolio, and our properties sat at the center of their planned corridor. Robert had declined their initial offer. Then he'd declined their second offer, which was 30% higher. According to the correspondence, he'd told them in writing that our company wasn't for sale at any price. That's when the letters changed tone. I found a document dated December 1st from a law firm I didn't recognize. Hastings, Mercer, and Cole. They represented interested parties who were prepared to pursue alternative acquisition strategies if Robert didn't reconsider. The language was carefully legal, but the threat was clear. Then came a letter dated December 10th. Not from lawyers, but from someone named Vincent Mercado. No company affiliation, no letterhead. Just 3 typed paragraphs that made my blood run cold. Mr. Whitman, you seem to believe you have a choice in this matter. Let me clarify. You don't. The North Point project will proceed with or without your cooperation. With your cooperation, you and your wife retire wealthy and healthy. Without it, well, accidents happen. Businesses burn. Elderly people have falls. I trust you understand the economics of the situation. Robert had received a death threat, a direct, unambiguous threat to both our lives, and he'd told no one. Not the police, not our lawyer, not me. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands steadier now that shock had given way to fury. How dare Robert make this decision alone? How dare he plan our entire future, our escape to Canada, without consulting me? But underneath the anger, understanding crept in. Robert wasn't trying to control me. He was trying to save me. In his mind, keeping me ignorant was keeping me safe. If I didn't know about the threats, I couldn't be targeted directly. I couldn't accidentally reveal our plans. I couldn't panic. He'd underestimated me. After 43 years, my husband had forgotten that the polite, quiet woman he'd married had steel in her spine. I was replacing the files when I heard the garage door opening. Robert was back early. I shoved the folders into the cabinet, locked it, returned the key to its hiding place, and was halfway up the stairs when Robert came through the front door. "Margot, just going to start laundry," I called down, proud that my voice sounded normal. That afternoon, Michael called. "Mom, I need to talk to you about Dad." My heart rate spiked. "What about him?" "He called me this morning. Asked about getting my help selling the company." I gripped the phone tighter. "He what?" "Said he and you had been discussing retirement. Wanted to know if I'd be interested in helping facilitate a sale." "But Mom, you'd have told me if you two were planning to sell, wouldn't you? That's our inheritance. Joyce's and mine." There it was. The assumption that had poisoned my relationship with my children for years. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, What's going on? Just concern about their inheritance. Your father and I haven't made any final decisions, I said carefully. We're exploring options. Options? Mom, that company is worth at least $20 million. You can't just explore options without consulting us. We have a right to know what's happening to our future. Your future? The words came out sharper than I intended. Michael, your father and I built that company from nothing. We took the risks, made the sacrifices, went without so you and Joyce could have everything you needed. The company is our life's work, not your trust fund. Silence on the other end. Then, I can't believe you're being this selfish. Joyce was right about you. Right about what? That you've changed. That you've gotten difficult, unreasonable. Maybe Dad's trying to handle the sale without you because he knows you're not thinking clearly anymore. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Not thinking clearly? Michael, I'm 70 years old, not senile. Joyce says it's common at your age. Memory issues, confusion, poor judgment. She thinks you might need help. Professional help. Joyce is a dental hygienist, not a neurologist, and there's nothing wrong with my mind. Then why won't you support Dad in this? He sounded stressed, Mom. Really stressed. Like this is killing him. If you love him, you'll stop being stubborn and let him do what's best for both of you. I hung up without responding. My hands were shaking again, but this time with rage. They'd planned this. Joyce and Michael, probably with encouragement from Vanessa and Derek, had decided their aging parents needed to be managed. And if I resisted, they had a ready explanation. Dementia, confusion, the inevitable decline of old age. I pulled up Joyce's contact, then stopped. Calling her would only make things worse. She and Michael had clearly been discussing me, probably for weeks. Any protest I made would be reframed as further evidence of my supposed decline. Instead, I scrolled through my phone until I found the number for James Morgan, our company's attorney for the past 15 years. James was 60, sharp, and had negotiated every major contract we'd signed in the last decade. Margot, Happy New Year. What can I do for you? James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Robert consulted you about selling the company? A pause. Too long. Margot, you know I can't discuss. James, please. I'm not asking you to violate attorney-client privilege. I'm asking as your friend, as someone whose business you've protected for 15 years. Is my husband in trouble? Another pause. When James spoke again, his voice was careful. 3 weeks ago, Robert came to my office. He wanted to know about expedited property transfers, asset protection strategies, and international estate planning. Specifically Canada. Did he tell you why? He said you two were considering retiring abroad. But Margot, the way he asked the questions, the urgency, it didn't feel like retirement planning. It felt like escape planning. Did he mention anyone named Vincent Mercado? Or North Point Development? No. Who are they? Potentially very dangerous people. James, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not tell Robert. Margot, please. I'm not asking you to betray his confidence. I'm asking you to protect us both. Can you quietly research North Point Development and Vincent Mercado? Find out who they really are, what their reputation is, whether there have been any criminal complaints or investigations. If Robert finds out, he won't. Not from me. James, my husband is planning to uproot our entire lives in 2 weeks because someone has threatened us. He thinks he's protecting me by keeping me ignorant. But I can't protect either of us if I don't understand what we're facing. James exhaled slowly. Give me 48 hours. I'll see what I can find. Thank you. Margot, be careful. If Robert's scared enough to run, these people are serious. I knew that. I'd read the threat myself. What I didn't know was how far they'd already gone to pressure Robert, what other threats had been made, what other leverage they held. That evening, Robert barely touched his dinner. He kept checking his phone, his leg bouncing under the table, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. Robert, whatever's bothering you, I want to help. There's nothing bothering me. Don't lie to me. I've known you for 43 years. I can see when something's wrong. His jaw tightened. Margot, sometimes a man has problems he needs to solve himself. That's all this is. Business problems. I'm handling it. We built that business together. We should handle its problems together. Not this time. His voice was final, closing the door on discussion. I cleared the dishes in silence, planning my next move. James would get me information on North Point and Mercado, but I needed more than background research. I needed to understand the full scope of the threat, and that meant going through Robert's phone records, his emails, his recent movements. It meant fully invading my husband's privacy, violating the trust that had been the foundation of our marriage. But that trust was already broken. Robert had broken it the moment he decided I was too fragile to handle the truth. Around midnight, I heard Robert in his study again, his voice rising occasionally before dropping back to an urgent whisper. I crept to the top of the stairs, straining to hear. Told you she doesn't know anything. I need more time. January 15th. That's the plan. I won't change it. You promised if I cooperated, you'd leave her alone. A long silence. Then, I understand the consequences. I'll make it happen. When he finally came upstairs at 2 a.m., I pretended to be asleep. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before retreating again to the guest room. 14 days until January 15th. 14 days to uncover the full truth, understand the threat, and find a way to protect us both. Because one thing was clear, Robert's plan to flee to Canada wasn't a solution. It was a surrender, and Margot Whitman had never surrendered in her life. I wasn't about to start now. James Morgan called at 9 a.m. on January 3rd. Robert had left an hour earlier for a meeting he claimed was with our accountant, though I'd already confirmed with Karen's office that no such meeting was scheduled. Margot, we need to meet in person. Not at my office. Somewhere private. The urgency in his voice sent ice through my veins. How bad is it? Worse than you think? Can you come to the Riverside Cafe at noon? The one on Oakmont Street? I'll be there. I spent the morning going through Robert's computer while he was out. He'd left it unlocked. Another sign of how distracted he'd become. His email revealed a trail of correspondence with someone named Julia Vance, a real estate broker specializing in international relocations. She'd sent him listings for properties in Vancouver, Victoria, and Toronto. Small houses, modest condos. Nothing like our 4-bedroom colonial. Robert was planning a permanent escape. Not a vacation. Not a temporary retreat. He intended to liquidate everything we'd built and disappear across the border. In his browser history, I found searches that made my stomach turn. Extradition laws Canada, witness protection alternatives, offshore asset protection, untraceable bank transfers. My husband wasn't just running from business pressure. He was running from something that terrified him so completely that he'd researched how to vanish entirely. I arrived at the Riverside Cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a booth in the back corner where we couldn't be overheard. James arrived exactly at noon, carrying a leather folder that he set on the table with visible reluctance. Before I show you this, I need to ask, does Robert have any idea you're investigating? None. He thinks I'm clueless. James nodded grimly. Keep it that way. Margot, what I found, this isn't just business pressure. This is organized crime. He opened the folder. Inside were printed articles, legal documents, and what looked like surveillance photos. North Point Development Group is a shell company. It was created 18 months ago specifically for this property acquisition project. The real money behind it comes from 3 sources: a private equity firm in New York, a commercial development consortium, and, this is where it gets dangerous, an organization with ties to the Castellano crime family. My mouth went dry. The mob? Not exactly. Vincent Mercado isn't technically a mobster. He's what they call a fixer, someone who operates in the gray area between legitimate business and organized crime. He facilitates deals that can't be done through normal channels. When persuasion fails, he applies pressure. When pressure fails, James didn't finish the sentence. He makes threats. He makes threats, and then he follows through on them. Margot, I found 3 other cases in the past 5 years where property owners resisted acquisition by Mercado's clients. One had a mysterious warehouse fire that destroyed half his inventory. Another was audited by the IRS. Turns out Mercado has connections in federal agencies. The third, James paused. The third was a 71-year-old man named Thomas Brennan. He owned a trucking company in Pennsylvania, refused to sell. 2 weeks later, he had a fall down his basement stairs. Broke his neck. The police ruled it accidental. The room seemed to tilt. You think they'd actually kill us? I think they'd kill Robert and make it look accidental, then pressure you to sell as a grieving widow. Or vice versa. These people don't make empty threats. I stared at the surveillance photos. They showed Robert entering and leaving various locations: a parking garage, a bank, a restaurant. Someone had been following my husband, documenting his movements. When were these taken? Last week. I found them on a private investigation forum. Someone's been watching him, Margot. Professionally. My hands clenched into fists. So Robert's plan to run to Canada might work temporarily. But these people have long memories and international reach. And here's the real problem. I accessed the corporate records this morning. Robert has already begun the paperwork to dissolve the company. He's listed the assets for sale through a private broker. He's accepting North Point's offer. What? When? The sale is scheduled to finalize January 14th, one day before you were supposed to leave for Canada. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Robert wasn't just planning our escape. He'd already surrendered our life's work. He'd made the decision unilaterally, without consulting me, without fighting back. How much are they paying? James's expression turned pained. $12 million. That's roughly half what the properties are actually worth. Robert's being robbed, and he's cooperating because he's terrified. $12 million. It sounded like a fortune, but our company was worth at least $25 million, possibly more. Robert was giving away $13 million out of fear. There's more, James said quietly. I found out who initiated contact with North Point about your properties. Who told them you owned the exact parcels they needed for their development corridor? Who? Your son-in-law, Derek. The cafe seemed to fade around me. What? Derek works for Hastings, Mercer & Cole, the law firm representing North Point. He's not a partner, just a junior associate, but he has access to their client files. 6 months ago, he flagged your company's holdings as potential acquisition targets. That's how this whole thing started. I couldn't breathe. Derek, Joyce's husband of 8 years. The man who'd sat at my table 3 nights ago, eating my food, toasting the new year. He'd sold us out to criminals. Does Joyce know? I don't know. But Margot, there's something else. Your children have been consulting with an elder care attorney. They're building a case for conservatorship. Conservatorship? The word felt foreign in my mouth. Legal guardianship of an incapacitated adult. If they can convince a judge that you're no longer mentally competent to manage your own affairs, they can take control of your assets, your medical decisions, everything. And with Robert apparently willing to sell the company, if they get conservatorship over you, they could block the sale, wait for Robert to die, or become incapacitated himself, and then inherit everything. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. Derek had started this nightmare by identifying our properties to North Point. When Robert resisted, Mercado applied pressure, real, terrifying pressure, that made my husband willing to abandon everything. Now Michael and Joyce, whether they knew about Derek's involvement or not, were positioning themselves to seize control if Robert's plan failed. My own children were circling like vultures. How do I stop this? James leaned forward. Legally? You can't. Robert has the authority to sell the company. He owns 51%. You own 49%. Unless you can prove he's under duress, which would require him to admit it, you have no legal recourse. As for the conservatorship, that's trickier. They'd need medical evidence of your incompetence. Have you seen any doctors recently? Just my regular checkup in November. Dr. Patterson said I'm healthy for my age. Get that in writing. Get a full cognitive assessment from a neurologist. Document everything. But Margot, here's the hard truth. Your best legal defenses will take months to establish, and you have 11 days before Robert signs everything away. I sat back, mind racing. Legal channels were too slow. But there had to be another way. Robert was capitulating because he thought he had no choice, because he believed Mercado's threats were inevitable. But threats only worked if the victim remained isolated and afraid. What if we went to the police? James shook his head. Mercado's too smart for that. His written threats are vague enough to be deniable. Accidents happen isn't legally actionable. And remember, he has connections. Filing a police report might just accelerate their timeline. Then what do you suggest? Honestly, take the 12 million and run. It's not fair, it's not right, but you'd be alive. Start over in Canada. Robert's plan isn't perfect, but it might work. I looked at the man who'd been our attorney for 15 years, who I'd trusted to protect our interests. He was telling me to surrender. No. Margot, no. I didn't spend 43 years building something from nothing just to let criminals and my own children steal it because they think I'm too old and too weak to fight back. There has to be another way. James studied me for a long moment. There might be, but it's risky, possibly illegal, and would require you to lie to your husband. Tell me. Mercado's pressure works because he operates in the shadows. He makes private threats, applies personal leverage. But men like him have vulnerabilities too. They have business relationships they need to protect, reputations they've carefully cultivated. If you could expose what he's doing, publicly, undeniably, he'd back off. The risk to his other operations would be too great. How would I expose him? You'd need evidence, recorded threats, documented pressure, proof of criminal coercion. You'd need Mercado to incriminate himself. And how would I get that? James pulled out a small device from his jacket pocket. This is a recording pen. Looks normal, but it captures audio clearly up to 30 feet away. If you could get Mercado to meet with you, make him think you're Robert's weak point, get him to make his threats explicit. He'd never meet with me. Robert's kept me out of this entirely. But what if Robert's plan was failing? What if you suddenly became an obstacle? Mercado would have to deal with you directly. I understood what James was suggesting. I'd have to sabotage Robert's cooperation, make myself a problem that Mercado couldn't ignore, force a confrontation. This could go very wrong, James warned. If Mercado suspects you're recording him, if he gets violent instead of verbal. I've been underestimated my whole life. By business competitors who thought a woman couldn't run a logistics company. By clients who wanted to negotiate with my husband instead of me. Now by criminals who think I'm just a frightened old woman. Let them underestimate me one more time. James slid the recording pen across the table. Be smart, Margot. Be safe. And for heaven's sake, don't tell Robert what you're planning. I pocketed the device. Thank you, James. Don't thank me yet. This might be the worst advice I've ever given. I drove home in a daze, my mind cycling through possibilities. I needed to become enough of a problem that Mercado had to deal with me directly. That meant interfering with Robert's plans, refusing to cooperate, making noise. It meant declaring war on the very people my husband was desperately trying to appease. Robert was home when I arrived, pacing in the living room. He looked up as I entered, and I saw something new in his eyes. Desperation. Where were you? Having lunch with Karen. Why? Margot, we need to talk. My heart hammered. Did he know? Had someone seen me with James? Robert sat heavily on the couch, his face haggard. I've made some decisions. About our future. About the company. What kind of decisions? I'm selling it. The whole thing. We're retiring. I forced my expression to remain neutral. After everything we've built? Just like that? It's time, Margot. We're in our 70s. We should be enjoying life, not working 70-hour weeks. We don't work 70-hour weeks. We have excellent managers. The company practically runs itself. I've made up my mind. His voice hardened. The sale is happening. I need you to sign the papers. And if I refuse? Robert's jaw clenched. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Just trust me, please. Trust you? Robert, you've been lying to me for weeks, sneaking around, making plans, deciding our entire future without consulting me. Now you want trust? You don't understand what's at stake. Then explain it to me. Tell me the truth. The truth is that I'm trying to protect you. He stood, his voice rising. The truth is that there are dangerous people who want what we have, and I'm trying to keep us both safe. The truth is that I need you to just this once, not fight me on everything and do what I'm asking. The outburst shocked us both. In 43 years, Robert had never yelled at me like that. "I'm not signing anything," I said quietly, "until you tell me everything. Who's threatening us? What do they want? What are you so afraid of?" Robert's face went pale. "How did you—" "I'm not stupid, Robert. I know something's wrong. I know you're scared. But running to Canada, selling our company for half its value, making decisions without me, that's not protection. That's panic. You need to stay out of this. It's my company too. My life too. I have every right to be involved." "No." Robert's voice was flat. Final. "You don't. Not this time. I'm handling it." "Why?" He walked out of the room, leaving me standing alone in the living room where we'd celebrated 43 New Years together. That night, I sent an email from a burner account I'd created that afternoon. The recipient was Vincent Mercado, whose contact information I'd found in Robert's files. The message was simple. "Mr. Mercado, my husband has told me about your offer for our company. I am not interested in selling, and I will not sign any paperwork. If you wish to discuss this matter, you may contact me directly. Margot Whitman." I included my cell phone number and hit send before I could reconsider. Within the hour, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Mrs. Whitman?" a smooth male voice said. "I think it's time we met." Vincent Mercado suggested we meet at a restaurant downtown. Neutral territory, he called it. Public enough to seem safe, private enough to talk freely. I agreed to meet him the following afternoon at 3 o'clock, giving myself time to prepare. That night, Robert didn't come to bed at all. I heard him in his study until dawn, the sound of drawers opening and closing, papers rustling, his voice occasionally rising in frustrated phone conversations I couldn't quite hear. In the morning, I found him at the kitchen table, surrounded by documents. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling as he reached for his coffee. "Robert, you look terrible. When did you last sleep?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're falling apart." He looked up at me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw the fear naked on his face. "Margot, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go stay with Joyce for a few days." "What? Why?" "Please. Don't ask questions. Just pack a bag and go. I'm not leaving this house. This is my home. It's not safe." He stopped himself, but too late. "Not safe from what? From whom?" Robert's jaw clenched. He gathered his papers and stood. "I have a meeting. We'll discuss this when I get back." "What meeting?" "Business." He was already walking away. I waited until his car pulled out of the driveway, then called James. "He knows something's changed," I told him. "He's trying to get me out of the house. Send me to Joyce's." "That's actually not a bad idea, Margot. If you're meeting with Mercado, I'm not running. I need to know what Robert's so afraid of. There's something he's not telling me, something beyond the threats." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Mercado threatened us, yes, but Robert's reaction is extreme even for that. The Canada plan, the complete surrender, trying to send me away. It's like he's expecting something imminent, something worse than threats." James was quiet for a moment. "I'll dig deeper. But Margot, be careful at this meeting. Keep the recording pen accessible. If Mercado says anything that makes you uncomfortable, anything at all, leave immediately." I spent the rest of the morning preparing. I practiced activating the recording pen until I could do it smoothly, naturally. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd present myself. Scared enough to seem vulnerable. Strong enough to seem worth negotiating with. At 2:30, I drove to the restaurant. It was an upscale Italian place, the kind where businessmen made deals over expensive wine. I arrived early, positioning myself at a table where I could see the entrance. Vincent Mercado walked in at exactly 3 o'clock. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 55, with silver gray hair and an expensive suit. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. When he spotted me, he smiled. Warm, disarming, completely at odds with the monster Robert feared. "Mrs. Whitman, thank you for agreeing to meet." He extended his hand. I shook it, noting the firm grip, the gold watch, the manicured nails. "Mr. Mercado." He sat across from me, ordering a bourbon when the waiter appeared. I declined anything to drink. My hands needed to stay steady. I appreciate directness, Mercado began. So I'll be frank. Your husband and I have been negotiating the sale of your company. We'd reached an agreement. Then you sent me that email. Why? I activated the recording pen in my purse, the tiny click masked by the restaurant noise. Because no one consulted me. Robert's been making decisions that affect my life without including me in the conversation. So this is about respect? Being included? This is about understanding what's really happening. My husband is terrified. He's planning to flee to Canada. He's selling our life's work for half its value. That's not retirement planning, Mr. Mercado. That's surrender. Mercado's smile didn't waver. Your husband is a smart man. He understands that sometimes the wisest choice is to walk away. From what? From whom? Who are you really, Mr. Mercado? I'm a businessman facilitating a real estate transaction. You're a criminal facilitating a robbery. The smile finally faded. Careful, Mrs. Whitman. Accusations like that can be dangerous. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Your husband understands the situation. I'm surprised he didn't explain it to you. He tried to protect me by keeping me ignorant. But I'm not ignorant anymore. I know about North Point development. I know about your connections to the Castellano family. I know about Thomas Brennan. Mercado's expression hardened. You've been doing homework. That's either very brave or very foolish. What happened to Thomas Brennan? Mr. Brennan had an accident. Tragic, but unrelated to our business dealings. He fell down his basement stairs 2 weeks after refusing to sell to your clients. Just like you threatened could happen to my husband or me. I never threatened anyone. Mercado's voice remained calm, but his eyes had gone cold. I simply pointed out that elderly people are vulnerable. Accidents happen. It would be unfortunate if something happened to you or your husband before you could enjoy your retirement. Every word was being recorded. I forced myself to push further. How much are you really making from this deal? If you're paying us $12 million for properties worth $25 million, someone's profiting $13 million. That's business, Mrs. Whitman. Buy low, sell high. It's extortion. You're using fear and intimidation to steal from us. Mercado leaned forward. Let me tell you what I see. I see a 70-year-old woman whose husband is trying desperately to keep her safe. I see someone who thinks she's being brave by confronting me, but who's actually putting herself in danger. Your husband agreed to my terms because he loves you. He's willing to lose money to keep you alive. Are you really going to undo all that because of pride? It's not pride. It's principle. Principle doesn't matter when you're dead. The words hung between us. I'd gotten what I needed. Implied threats, admission of coercion, enough to prove duress. But I kept going. Why our company? Why these specific properties? They're positioned perfectly for a development project that will reshape the entire commercial corridor. Your warehouses and distribution centers sit on land worth exponentially more than you realize. We're not stealing from you, Mrs. Whitman. We're offering you a fraction of future value, yes, but that's how development works. And if we refuse? Mercado sat back. Then the project proceeds anyway, with or without your cooperation. And I can't guarantee your safety if you become an obstacle. You just threatened me directly. I stated a fact. These projects involve significant money, powerful people, interests that don't appreciate interference. Your husband understands this. He's making the smart choice. My husband is being terrorized. Your husband is being realistic. Mercado's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood. I have another appointment. Mrs. Whitman, I genuinely hope you reconsider. The offer expires January 14th. After that, I can't control what happens. He dropped a business card on the table. If you change your mind, call me. Otherwise, convince your husband to finalize the sale. For both your sakes. He left without another word. I sat frozen, the recording pen still running, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd gotten what I needed, but I'd also confirmed something terrifying. Mercado wasn't bluffing. The threats were real, the danger immediate. I drove straight to James's office. He listened to the recording twice, his expression growing grimmer. This is good. This is actionable. We can take this to the FBI, to the state attorney. And how long would an investigation take? We have 10 days before Robert signs everything away. Margot, this is evidence of criminal coercion. It changes everything. Does it? Mercado was careful. He never explicitly said he'd hurt us. Every threat was veiled, deniable. And you said he has connections in federal agencies. What if we report this and it just accelerates their timeline? James rubbed his face. Then what do you want to do? I need leverage. Something that makes me more valuable alive and cooperative than dead and out of the way. I need to know what makes this project so important that they're willing to commit crimes to secure it. I might be able to help with that. James pulled up his computer. I've been researching the North Point development plan. It's not just commercial real estate. They're building a logistics hub that will serve 3 major ports, handle international shipping, warehousing, distribution. Your properties are literally at the center of it. Without them, the entire project stalls. So we have leverage. They need our land. They need it, yes. But they have time. They can wait you out, apply pressure until you break, or until Robert breaks and forces the sale. Unless we make waiting too expensive? What do you mean? An idea was forming, dangerous and potentially illegal, but possibly our only chance. What if we can't sell? What if the properties are tied up in legal complications that make a sale impossible? Like what? Like a lawsuit. Like disputed ownership. Like environmental concerns or zoning challenges that would require years of litigation to resolve. James's eyes widened. Margot, filing frivolous lawsuits. Who said frivolous? We've owned those properties for 40 years. I'm sure there are legitimate concerns we could raise. Environmental assessments that were never completed. Zoning variances that were improperly granted. Property line disputes with neighbors. That would make you an active obstacle. Exactly what Mercado warned against. Which is why I need protection. Real protection. Not just recordings, but something that makes harming us too risky. Like what? Like publicity. Like making this situation visible enough that any accident would immediately trigger investigation. Like, I paused, the full plan crystallizing. Like my children's conservatorship case. James looked confused. How would that help? Michael and Joyce think I'm becoming incompetent. They're building a legal case to take control of my assets. What if I let them? Margot? Not really. But what if I made them think they were winning? What if I appeared to deteriorate, to become confused and vulnerable, so they push forward with the conservatorship? If they file publicly, if there's a legal proceeding where my competency is being challenged, then any sudden accident to me would look incredibly suspicious. The timing would be too convenient. You want to fake cognitive decline? I want to create a situation where Mercado can't touch me without triggering massive scrutiny. A legal proceeding means judges, lawyers, court records, medical evaluations, all documented, all public. If I die or have an accident in the middle of a conservatorship hearing, every agency from the local police to the FBI would investigate. James stared at me. This is insane. This is survival. I make myself look weak and vulnerable to my children, which they already believe. They push for conservatorship, creating a public legal record of my diminished capacity. Meanwhile, I'm actually documenting everything Mercado does, gathering evidence, building a case. When the conservatorship hearing happens, I prove I'm completely competent, expose the coercion, and reveal everything in open court where it becomes public record. And if it goes wrong, if the judge actually grants conservatorship, then I appeal, but I don't think it will get that far. Once everything is public, once the FBI and state prosecutors are involved, Mercado will back off. The risk to his other operations will be too great. James shook his head slowly. You're talking about manipulating your own children, lying to your husband, potentially perjuring yourself in court. I'm talking about staying alive. About protecting what Robert and I built, about not letting criminals and opportunistic children steal everything we've worked for. Margot, this could destroy your family. My family is already destroyed. Derek betrayed us. Michael and Joyce are trying to have me declared incompetent. Robert's lying to me, planning to abandon our life without my consent. What family am I protecting? The words came out more bitter than I'd intended, but they were true. The people I'd loved and trusted had become adversaries. Now I had to outmaneuver them all. James was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "If you're going to do this, you need to be perfect. One mistake, one inconsistency, and everything falls apart." "I know. And you need to be prepared for the possibility that Robert might never forgive you for the deception." That thought cut deeper than any of Mercado's threats. 43 years of marriage, and I was about to lie to my husband more extensively than he'd ever lied to me. But what choice did I have? Robert's way led to surrender, exile, and the slow death of everything we'd built. My way was dangerous, possibly illegal, but it was a fight. And Margot Whitman had never surrendered without a fight. "Set it in motion," I told James. "Make it look like you're concerned about my behavior. Mention it to Michael casually. Let him think it's coming from you, not from me. Margot, do it, please. We have 9 days left. I need my children to file for conservatorship before Robert signs those papers." James nodded reluctantly. "I'll make the call tonight. But Margot, I'm documenting everything. If this goes to trial, I need to be able to prove we acted in good faith." "Understood." I left his office as the sun set, painting the winter sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere out there, Mercado was reporting back to his employers. Robert was finalizing his surrender. My children were plotting to take control of my life. And I was about to start the most dangerous performance of my life. The elderly, confused woman who didn't understand what was happening. The vulnerable target who needed protection. The obstacle that wasn't worth eliminating because she was already being neutralized by her own family. I just had to convince everyone, including the man I'd loved for 43 years, that I was losing my mind. Starting tonight. I began my performance that very night. When Robert came home at 8 o'clock, I was standing in the kitchen, staring at the stove with genuine confusion on my face, though not for the reason he'd assume. "Margot? Everything okay?" I turned to him slowly. "I was making dinner." I thought, wasn't I making dinner? The stove was cold, empty. No pots, no ingredients. I'd deliberately started nothing, creating the appearance of a forgotten task. Robert's face shifted from concern to alarm. "Did you eat lunch?" "Lunch?" I pressed my fingers to my temple. "I went somewhere. A restaurant, I think. Or was that yesterday?" "Margot, you're scaring me." "I'm fine. Just tired." I moved past him toward the stairs. "I think I'll lie down." I felt his eyes on me as I climbed the stairs, felt the weight of his worry. The guilt was crushing, but I pushed it aside. This was survival. Over the next 2 days, I carefully constructed a pattern of concerning behavior. I left my car keys in the refrigerator. I called Robert by our son's name twice. I started the washing machine without putting any clothes in it. Each incident was small, easily explained away individually, but together they painted a picture of cognitive decline. James made his call to Michael on the evening of January 5th. I wasn't present, but James reported back that Michael had been very concerned and planned to discuss it with Joyce immediately. The next morning, both my children showed up at the house unannounced. "Mom, we need to talk," Joyce said, her voice artificially gentle, the tone you'd use with a child. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll make coffee." I went to the cupboard where we'd kept the coffee for 20 years and opened the wrong one, staring at the canned goods with apparent confusion. "Mom," Michael said carefully, "the coffee's in the cupboard to the left." "Oh, yes. Of course." I moved to the correct cupboard, catching Joyce's significant glance at Michael. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd celebrated birthdays, holidays, graduations. Now my children sat across from me like investigators, watching for more signs of my supposed deterioration. "James called Michael," Joyce began. "He's concerned about you. He said you've seemed confused lately, forgetful. James worries too much." "I'm fine." "Mom, you called the office 3 times yesterday asking about a meeting that happened last week," Michael said. "You didn't remember that you'd already attended it." I had done no such thing, but I didn't challenge the lie. Let them build their case. Did I? "I've been distracted. Your father has been so stressed lately." "About what?" Joyce leaned forward. "The business. He wants to sell it." "Did he tell you?" "He mentioned retirement planning," Michael said carefully. "Do you understand what that means, Mom?" Of course I understand. I'm not stupid. I let irritation creep into my voice. We built that company together. We should decide its future together. But Dad says you've been resistant to the idea. Unreasonable about it. There it was. Robert had been talking to them, sharing his frustrations, probably looking for support in convincing me to sign the papers. I'm not unreasonable. I'm just not ready to give up everything we built. Joyce reached across the table, patting my hand with patronizing sympathy. Mom, sometimes holding on too tightly to the past means we can't enjoy the future. Dad wants you both to retire, travel, relax. Don't you think you've earned that? What I've earned, I said quietly, is the right to make my own decisions about my own life. Michael and Joyce exchanged another look. I could read it clearly. Denial, resistance to reality, classic signs of cognitive decline. We just want what's best for you, Michael said. Sometimes that means accepting help. I don't need help. Mom, you left the stove on for 3 hours yesterday. You could have burned the house down. Another lie. I'd been out of the house all yesterday afternoon, and Robert had been home. But Michael delivered it with such conviction that I almost doubted my own memory. This was how it would go. They'd manufacture evidence of my incompetence, mix it with my deliberately confusing behavior, and build a legal case for conservatorship. Let them. After they left, I found Robert in his study, head in his hands. They're worried about you, he said without looking up. They're worried about their inheritance. Margot, that's not fair. They love you. Do they? Or do they love what we've built, the money we'll leave behind? Robert finally looked at me, and I saw something break in his expression. I can't do this anymore. I can't watch you fight everyone, fight reality. I'm selling the company, with or without your signature. You can't sell without my consent. I own 49%. I can if you're not competent to make that decision. The words came out flat, final. Michael and Joyce are filing for conservatorship. James told me this afternoon. My heart seized, though I'd been expecting exactly this. You're supporting them? I'm not opposing them. Margot, you need help. Professional help. And if getting it means temporarily giving up some control over the business, then that's what needs to happen. I'm not incompetent, Robert. You left the burner on. You forgot a meeting you attended. You put your keys in the refrigerator. I was distracted. That's not dementia. It's enough to warrant evaluation. The court date is January 13th. They've expedited it given the circumstances. January 13th. 1 day before Robert's planned sale. 2 days before our supposed escape to Canada. Everything was converging exactly as I'd predicted, and exactly as I'd planned. What circumstances? I asked carefully. Robert's face crumbled. Margot, please, just trust me. Sign the papers. Let the sale go through. Let Michael and Joyce help you. Everything will be better if you just stop fighting. Better for whom? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, I compiled everything I'd gathered over the past week. Recordings of Mercado's threats. Documents showing Derek's connection to North Point. Financial records proving Robert was selling for half the company's value. Evidence of the surveillance that had been conducted on Robert. Research on the Castellano crime family's involvement in development projects. I burned it all to a USB drive and made 3 copies. One went into a safety deposit box I'd opened under my maiden name. One went to James with instructions to deliver it to the FBI if anything happened to me. The third I kept hidden in my bedroom, sewn into the lining of a decorative pillow Robert never touched. January 13th arrived gray and cold. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the county courthouse. Robert drove us in silence, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Michael and Joyce were already there with their lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Downs who specialized in elder care law. Derek stood beside Joyce, and seeing him made my blood boil. The man who'd betrayed us, who'd started this entire nightmare, standing there with the self-righteous expression of someone doing their duty. We gathered in a small courtroom before Judge Karen Harrison, a woman in her mid-60s with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every manipulation and lie in the book. Patricia Downs presented her case with clinical efficiency. Margot Whitman, age 70, showing signs of cognitive decline, forgetfulness, confusion, poor judgment, resistance to necessary medical care, multiple witnesses attesting to concerning behavior, a husband at his wit's end trying to protect a woman who wouldn't protect herself. Michael testified about the phone calls I supposedly made. Joyce described finding me confused and disoriented at the house. Robert, his voice breaking, talked about his fear that I'd hurt myself through negligence. James sat beside me, occasionally making notes, playing the role of the concerned attorney trying to protect an incompetent client. Then it was my turn to testify. I stood slowly, playing the part one final time. Frail, uncertain, a confused old woman who didn't quite understand why everyone was making such a fuss. Patricia Downs approached with practiced sympathy. "Mrs. Whitman, do you understand why you're here today? My children think I'm losing my mind." "And are you? Losing your mind?" "No. But you've been forgetful, haven't you? Confused?" "Sometimes. Everyone forgets things. You left your stove on for 3 hours. You could have started a fire." "That's not true." "Are you calling your son a liar?" "I'm saying it didn't happen the way he described." Patricia smiled that sympathetic smile I'd come to hate. "Mrs. Whitman, isn't it possible you simply don't remember, that your memory of events isn't reliable?" This was the moment, the culmination of everything I'd planned. I looked directly at Judge Harrison. "Your Honor, may I present evidence?" Patricia looked startled. "Your Honor, Mrs. Whitman isn't represented by counsel in a capacity to—" "She has an attorney present," the judge interrupted. "I'll allow it." "Mr. Morgan?" James stood, and I saw the slight smile he couldn't quite suppress. "Your Honor, my client has been conducting her own investigation into the circumstances that led to this hearing. She has evidence that directly contradicts the claims of cognitive decline and addresses the real motivation behind this conservatorship petition." "Objection!" Patricia was on her feet. "This is highly irregular." "Overruled. I want to hear this." Judge Harrison leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitman, proceed." I straightened, dropping the confused elderly woman act like a coat I no longer needed. When I spoke, my voice was clear, strong, and absolutely steady. "Your Honor, I have not been experiencing cognitive decline. I have been conducting a strategic investigation into criminal coercion, family betrayal, and conspiracy to defraud. Everything my children and husband have described as confusion was deliberate misdirection on my part to expose the truth." The courtroom went silent. Robert's face had gone white. Michael and Joyce looked stunned. "For the past 2 weeks," I continued, "my husband has been planning to sell our company to an organization connected to organized crime. He's doing this because we've been threatened with violence if we don't cooperate. The sale price is roughly half the company's actual value, a theft of approximately $13 million. My son-in-law, Derek, who works for the law firm representing the buyers, initiated this entire situation by identifying our properties as acquisition targets." Derek's face flushed red. Joyce turned to stare at him. "My children," I went on, "decided to pursue conservatorship not out of concern for my well-being, but to gain control of assets they believe they're entitled to inherit. They've manufactured evidence of my incompetence, lying under oath to support their petition." "This is absurd," Michael shouted. "Mom, you're paranoid. I have recordings," I said calmly. "I have documentation. I have evidence of every claim I'm making." I nodded to James, who approached the bench with the USB drive. "Your Honor, this contains recorded conversations with Vincent Mercado, the man who threatened my husband and me. It contains financial documents showing the true value of our company versus the sale price. It contains evidence of my son-in-law's connection to the buyers. It contains medical records from last week showing that I'm cognitively sound, tests I had done specifically to prove my competence when this moment arrived." Judge Harrison took the drive, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Morgan, this is highly unusual." "Yes, Your Honor. My client chose an unusual path, but she did so because conventional approaches would have taken too long and left her vulnerable to very real threats. These allegations are serious. Criminal conspiracy, perjury, all documented, Your Honor, all provable." The judge looked at me for a long moment. "Mrs. Whitman, You deliberately misled your family, your husband, and potentially this court. I deliberately protected myself and my assets from people who were trying to steal from me. Some of those people are criminals. Some are my own children. I did what I needed to do to survive and to expose the truth. Judge Harrison turned to Patricia Downs. Counselor, I'm going to need time to review this evidence. I'm postponing this hearing for 48 hours. In the meantime, Mrs. Whitman retains full legal capacity and control over her affairs. If what she's saying is true, we're going to have much bigger problems than conservatorship. She looked at Michael and Joyce. If you've lied under oath in my courtroom, you'll face consequences, serious ones. Then to Robert. Mr. Whitman, I'm issuing a temporary injunction against the sale of your company pending investigation of these allegations. You will not sign any documents or transfer any assets until we get to the bottom of this. Robert sat frozen, unable to speak. The judge's gaze finally landed on Derek. And you, Mr. Palmer, should probably contact your own attorney. Today. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Joyce was shouting at Derek. Michael was demanding explanations from James. Patricia Downs stood in shock, her carefully constructed case disintegrating. And Robert just stared at me across the room, his expression a mixture of betrayal, relief, fear, and something I couldn't quite identify. I walked out of the courthouse into the cold January air, my hands steady, my mind clear. I'd done it. I'd exposed everything, protected our assets, and forced the truth into the open where it could be addressed legally. But I'd also destroyed my family in the process, and I still had no idea if we'd survive what came next. The silence in the car on the way home was suffocating. Robert gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the road ahead. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the winter landscape blur past, feeling the weight of what I'd done settling over me like a heavy blanket. When we pulled into our driveway, Robert didn't get out immediately. He just sat there, engine idling, staring at our home, the house we'd bought in 1983, where we'd raised our children, celebrated anniversaries, built a life. How long? His voice was hoarse. How long have you known everything? Since New Year's Eve. I saw the message on your phone. He closed his eyes. And you said nothing. You let me believe I was safe, I interrupted. You let me believe everything was fine while you planned to uproot our entire lives without consulting me. You decided what I could handle, what I needed to know. You made yourself my protector without asking if I wanted protecting. I was trying to keep you alive. By treating me like a child, by lying to me, planning behind my back, deciding my future without my input. Robert, we've been partners for 43 years. Partners don't make unilateral decisions about everything they've built together. Partners don't manipulate each other either. His voice broke. You made me think you were losing your mind. You made me believe I was watching you slip away. Do you have any idea what that did to me? The pain in his voice cut through me. I know, and I'm sorry for that. But Robert, you were going to give away $13 million to criminals. You were going to surrender everything we worked for because you thought I was too fragile to handle the truth. Because I love you. He turned to face me, tears streaming down his weathered face. Because the thought of something happening to you, of Mercado's people hurting you, was more terrifying than losing every penny we have. I would have given them everything, Margot. Everything, if it meant keeping you safe. I reached for his hand. He pulled away. Don't. I can't. I need time to process this. He got out of the car and walked into the house, leaving me sitting alone. That night, Robert slept in the guest room again. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd saved our company only to lose my marriage. The next morning, James called. The FBI wants to talk to you. Judge Harrison forwarded everything to the federal prosecutor's office. They're opening an investigation into Mercado, North Point, and the connection to the Castellano family. What about Derek? He's been suspended from his law firm pending their internal investigation. Joyce filed for divorce this morning. I felt no satisfaction in that news, only a deep sadness. And Michael? Furious. He's claiming you manipulated everyone. that the conservatorship was filed in good faith based on genuine concern. It was filed based on lies he told under oath. I know. So does the judge. Margot, there could be perjury charges against both your children. The thought made me sick. I never wanted that. Then you should have found another way. James's voice was gentle but firm. What you did was brilliant, but it came with costs. You knew that going in. I did know. I'd calculated every risk, weighed every consequence. I'd chosen this path with open eyes. But knowing the cost and paying it were two different things. 2 days later, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Whitman. Vincent Mercado's smooth voice filled my ear. Congratulations. You're a very clever woman. Mr. Mercado, I assume you've heard about the FBI investigation. I have. Which is why I'm calling to inform you that North Point Development Group is withdrawing its offer for your properties. We've decided to pursue alternative acquisition strategies. Hi, you mean you're afraid of federal scrutiny? I mean the deal has become more complicated than it's worth. You've made quite a mess, Mrs. Whitman. Involving the courts, the FBI, making everything public. That's not how business is done. Extortion isn't how business is done either. A pause. Then, I want you to understand something. This isn't over because you won. It's over because continuing would cost me more than it's worth. But there are other projects, other opportunities. And memories in this business are very long. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You embarrassed powerful people, made them look weak. That's not something they'll forget. Then let me give you a fact, Mr. Mercado. Everything you've said to me, every threat you've made, every implication of violence, it's all been recorded and documented. If anything happens to me, to my husband, to anyone in my family, those recordings go public. To the FBI, to the media, to every law enforcement agency I can reach. You'll spend the rest of your life in court, if you're not in prison. Silence on the other end. Then, surprisingly, a low chuckle. You really are impressive. Your husband should have consulted you from the beginning. Things might have gone very differently. They might have, but they didn't. No, they didn't. Goodbye, Mrs. Whitman. For your sake, I hope we never speak again. The line went dead. I sat holding the phone, my hands shaking with delayed reaction. It was over. Mercado was backing off. The FBI was investigating. Our company was safe. But the victory felt hollow. That evening, Michael and Joyce came to the house. Robert let them in without consulting me. And suddenly we were all in the living room, the four of us together, for what might be the last time as a family. Joyce's eyes were red from crying. Michael looked haggard, older than his 45 years. We need to talk, Michael began. All of us. About what happens now. What happens now, Robert said heavily, is that we deal with the consequences of everyone's choices, mine included. Joyce turned to me, her voice trembling. Mom, I didn't know. About Derek. About what he'd done. I swear I didn't know. Didn't you? You knew he worked for Hastings, Mercer and Cole. You knew they represented North Point. You never thought to ask if there was a connection. I trusted him. I thought... She broke off, wiping her eyes. I thought he loved me, that we were building a life together. I didn't know he was using me, using our family. But you were willing to have me declared incompetent, I said quietly. You were willing to lie in court about my mental state to take control of my assets. That wasn't Derek's doing. That was yours. We thought we were protecting you, Michael protested. Dad was acting strange. You were acting strange. Everything was falling apart. We thought if we could just take control temporarily, we could sort everything out. You thought you could take what you believed was rightfully yours without waiting for us to die, I corrected. You saw an opportunity and you took it. That's not fair, isn't it? Michael, you lied on the witness stand. You testified that I called the office 3 times asking about a meeting I'd already attended. That never happened. Joyce, you told the judge you found me confused and disoriented. That was theater, and you knew it. You both manufactured evidence to support a case that had nothing to do with my well-being and everything to do with your inheritance. Silence fell. Neither of them could meet my eyes. Robert spoke up, his voice raw. They're not the only ones who lied. Margot, you deceived all of us. You made me believe I was watching you deteriorate. You used our children's greed against them. You manipulated everyone in this family to serve your own agenda. My agenda was survival, I said. My agenda was protecting what we built from criminals and opportunists. Yes, I lied. Yes, I manipulated. But I did it because every other option had been taken from me. You took away my right to know what was happening. They took away my right to control my own assets. I did what I had to do with the weapons I had available. And now we're here, Robert said. A family that can't trust each other, children facing perjury charges, a marriage that might not survive this. Was it worth it, Margot? Was saving the company worth all of this? The question hung in the air. Was it worth it? I looked at each of them. Robert, the man I'd loved for 43 years, who'd tried to protect me in the worst possible way. Michael and Joyce, the children I'd raised, who'd become strangers obsessed with inheritance. My family, broken and bleeding from wounds we'd all inflicted on each other. I don't know, I admitted. Ask me again in a year. Ask me when we know if our marriage survives. Ask me after we've all had time to process what we've done to each other. Joyce wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. For all of it. For not trusting you. For believing you were weak. For trying to take control. I was scared and selfish, and I made terrible choices. I'm sorry, too, Michael said quietly. I convinced myself we were helping, but really, I was just protecting my interests. Our interests. I failed you as a son. They were the words I'd needed to hear, but they didn't erase the damage. I appreciate your apologies, I said. But apologies don't rebuild trust. That takes time, if it can be rebuilt at all. Robert stood. I think we all need space. Time to think about what we want from this family, if we want to still be a family. Michael and Joyce left shortly after, their goodbyes awkward and painful. When the door closed behind them, Robert and I stood in the living room, two people who'd built a life together and nearly lost it all. I'm sleeping in the guest room again tonight, Robert said. I can't. I understand. Do you? Because I don't. I don't understand how we got here, Margot. How we became people who lie to each other, who keep secrets, who manipulate instead of communicate. We got here because we stopped being partners and started being protectors. You trying to protect me from the truth. Me trying to protect us both from your fear. We forgot how to trust each other. Can we get it back? His voice was so small, so vulnerable. The trust? The partnership? I don't know, but I want to try. 3 weeks later, the FBI arrested Vincent Mercado and 2 other men connected to North Point Development on charges of criminal coercion, conspiracy to commit fraud, and racketeering. Derek lost his law license and was facing his own criminal charges for conflict of interest and breach of fiduciary duty. Judge Harrison dismissed the conservatorship petition with prejudice, meaning it could never be filed again. She also referred Michael and Joyce to the district attorney for perjury, though ultimately no charges were filed after they provided testimony against Mercado and Derek. James helped us restructure the company, bringing in independent board members and establishing clear succession plans that didn't depend on family involvement. Michael and Joyce would inherit their shares when we died, but they'd have no management authority unless they earned it through actual work in the business. Robert and I started couples counseling. It was awkward and painful, sitting in a therapist's office at 70 and 72, admitting that we'd failed each other in fundamental ways. But we showed up every week, did the work, slowly rebuilt the foundation that had cracked. One evening in late February, Robert knocked on our bedroom door. He'd been sleeping in the guest room for 6 weeks. Can I come in? Of course. He sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed we'd shared for 4 decades. I've been thinking about what you said, about how I treated you like you were too fragile to handle the truth. Robert, let me finish, please. He took a breath. You were right. I made decisions that should have been ours to make together. I convinced myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself from having to see you scared, from having to admit that I didn't have all the answers. I failed you as a partner. You were terrified. Mercado threatened to kill us. Yes. And instead of bringing that fear to you, instead of trusting you to handle it, I tried to handle it alone. I forgot who I married. I forgot that you're the woman who helped me build a business from nothing, who negotiated our toughest contracts, who never backed down from a challenge. I saw you as someone who needed protecting instead of someone who could fight beside me. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I scared you. When I pretended to deteriorate, I made you watch what you thought was me losing myself. You did. And I'm still angry about that. But I understand why you did it. You were cornered, with no good options, fighting enemies on all sides. You used the weapons available to you. He reached for my hand. I just wish one of those weapons hadn't been my fear of losing you. I'm sorry. For that pain specifically. I knew it would hurt you, and I did it anyway. And I'm sorry for making it necessary, for putting you in a position where deception felt like your only option. We sat in silence, holding hands. Two people who'd hurt each other deeply trying to find their way back to partnership. Robert, can I ask you something? That night, New Year's Eve, when you told me not to make plans for January, what were you really planning? He sighed. I was going to take you to Canada on the 15th. Tell you it was a vacation, a break from stress. Then, once we were there, I was going to explain everything. The threats, the sale, the reason we couldn't go back. I'd already transferred enough money to offshore accounts to keep us comfortable. I was going to make it permanent without giving you the chance to refuse. You were going to kidnap me. I was going to save you. His voice broke. That's how I saw it. Saving you from danger you didn't even know existed. Instead, you almost handed our company to criminals and our lives to our children's greed. Yes, because I underestimated you. I saw age where I should have seen wisdom. I saw vulnerability where I should have seen strength. Margot, you're 70 years old, and you outmaneuvered everyone. Mercado, our children, me. You saw the whole board while we were all focused on individual pieces. I had no choice. You'd all left me with no choice. I know. And I'm sorrier for that than I can express. That night, Robert moved back into our bedroom. We lay beside each other in the dark, not touching yet, but together. It was a start. By spring, our relationship with Michael and Joyce had evolved into something different than it had been. More honest, less comfortable. They visited less frequently, and when they did, conversations were careful, bounded by the knowledge of what we'd all done to each other. But there was also growth. Joyce started therapy to process Derek's betrayal and her own choices. Michael took a hard look at his priorities and made changes in how he related to his own children, determined not to raise them to see their parents as merely sources of inheritance. One Sunday in April, we had them all over for dinner. The first family gathering since the courthouse. The grandchildren ran in the yard while we adults sat on the porch, drinking lemonade, watching them play. I've been thinking, Joyce said carefully, about what I want to say to you, to both of you. She looked at Robert and me. I want to say that I'm learning something from all of this, about strength and age and wisdom. What's that? I asked. That getting older doesn't mean getting weaker. That experience isn't the same as obsolescence. You both tried to protect us in your own ways. Dad by handling everything himself, Mom by exposing everything to the light. And we tried to protect our interest by taking control. But nobody trusted anybody. We all forgot that we're supposed to be family, not adversaries. That's very perceptive, Robert said quietly. Michael nodded. I keep thinking about what the judge said, about consequences. We're all living with them now. Derek's facing trial. Joyce is divorced. Mom and Dad almost lost everything. Our family almost destroyed itself. And for what? For money we didn't earn, for control we didn't deserve. For fear, I said. We all acted from fear. Your father feared for my safety. I feared for our legacy. You feared for your inheritance. Fear makes us all stupid. So what do we do now? Joyce asked. I looked at Robert. He looked back at me. And in his eyes I saw the man I'd married 43 years ago. Older, wiser, scarred by recent events, but still my partner. We rebuild, Robert said. Not what we had. That's gone. But something new, something more honest. It won't be easy, I added. We've all hurt each other too much for easy forgiveness. But if we're willing to work at it, if we're willing to be honest even when it's uncomfortable, maybe we can salvage something worth having. The grandchildren's laughter drifted across the yard. A new generation, unburdened by our mistakes, at least for now. That evening, after everyone left, Robert and I stood at the window watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Do you think they'll ever really forgive us?" Robert asked. "For our parts in this." "I don't know. Do you think you'll ever really forgive me?" He considered the question seriously. "I think I'll forgive the deception eventually. What I'm struggling to forgive is that you were right. That your way, painful and manipulative as it was, saved us. While my way would have cost us everything. Your way came from love. So did yours. Just a different kind of love. Love that trusts the other person to be strong instead of assuming they need protection." I leaned against him, feeling his arm come around my shoulders. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? 70 and 72, still figuring out how to be married. Better late than never. The house behind us, the home we'd almost lost, that I'd fought so hard to keep, stood solid and unchanged. But we had changed. Our family had changed. The foundation we'd taken for granted had cracked, and now we were building something new on the broken pieces. It wouldn't be the same. It would always carry the scars of what we'd done to each other, the lies we'd told, the trust we'd broken. But maybe, I thought, that was okay. Maybe perfection wasn't the goal. Maybe survival was enough. Maybe learning that age brought wisdom instead of weakness. That partnership meant trust instead of protection. That family required honesty instead of manipulation. Maybe those lessons, learned late and hard, were enough. I looked up at my husband, this man who'd tried to save me by treating me like a child, who'd learned the painful lesson that I didn't need saving. I needed partnership. "Robert?" "Yes?" "Next time we face a crisis, and there will be a next time, promise me we'll face it together. No secrets, no protection, no lies. Just two partners figuring it out side by side." He kissed the top of my head. "I promise, on one condition." "What's that?" "Promise me that if you ever have to choose between manipulating me and trusting me, you'll choose trust. Even if it's harder, even if it's scarier." I thought about that. About how much easier it had been to deceive than to confront. About how much damage that ease had caused. "I promise." We stood together as darkness fell. Two people who'd built an empire, nearly lost everything, and emerged on the other side changed but intact. The January plan, Robert's plan to flee, my plan to fight, had both failed and succeeded in different ways. We hadn't escaped to Canada. We hadn't lost our company. We'd lost our illusions about each other, about our children, about the ease of trust and the price of deception. But we'd gained something too. A harder, more honest understanding of who we were individually and together. The knowledge that strength didn't diminish with age, it transformed. That wisdom wasn't about knowing all the answers. It was about asking the right questions. And the understanding that partnership, real partnership, meant trusting your partner to be strong enough to handle the truth, even when the truth was terrifying. Our home stood behind us, symbol of everything we'd built and fought to keep. Not just a house, but a legacy. Not just a company, but proof that two people who trusted each other could build something lasting. The trust had been broken, but broken things could be repaired if both people were willing to do the work. We were willing. And that, I thought, was victory enough. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.